We go to Margaret in Greeley, Colorado for our first Teletown call. Go ahead, Margaret. Margaret, are you there? Let me ask Margaret's question for her. She wants to keep her good coverage. Will it continue with the new plan?
Here's a guarantee that I've made. If you have insurance that you like, then you will be able to keep that insurance. If you've got a doctor that you like, you will be able to keep your doctor. Nobody is trying to change what works in the system. We are trying to change what doesn't work in the system.
And that was President Obama in 2009 responding to Margaret in Greeley, Colorado, on an issue that was of great concern to Americans when they learned the federal government would be meddling with their health care. And there was President Obama promising unequivocally that Margaret would be able to keep the insurance and the doctor she was perfectly happy with. But this week we learned that not only is that not true, and that people are in fact losing their health plans, but that President Obama's administration has known this would happen for over 3 years. In essence, ObamaCare's passage was built on a foundation of lies and promises that simply can't be delivered. It's a fact that this is just starting to hit people as they receive notices from their insurance companies that their plans are being dropped. And we've heard from many Floridians who are being impacted, and they are outraged, as I am, by the president's broken promise. So, for example, I wanted to share with you a couple of those letters here in this week's edition of Constituent Mailbox, because some of it really is troubling in terms of the impact that it's going to have on people. So here's Barbara in Palm Coast, Florida. She writes, I am a master's level registered nurse who up until recently held a good job with good benefits. Due to many new restrictions on employers, I have been reduced to part-time without benefits at the age of 64. Many healthcare workers are being cut in hours due to ObamaCare. My company tried to offer me an insurance plan that I could afford to purchase, but I received a letter stating that it didn't meet the standards of the Affordable Care Act, and so I have until January 1st to purchase more costly insurance or face the consequences. This is a terrible, despicable law that has damaged many more people than just myself. Sue from Pensacola emails us. She says, I live in Pensacola, Florida. I've been employed at one of our local hospitals since August of 2007. I loved my job and I had wonderful insurance coverage for myself and my family. As a result of ObamaCare, 3.5 months ago, my job was eliminated. I lost my income and all my insurance coverage. My husband, who is self-employed, and we have never been able to afford insurance. Now I just heard on the news that the same ObamaCare that took my job and my insurance is going to fine me for not having insurance. Would you please explain that to me? Sue, I can't explain it to you other than to tell you that this is the impact that ObamaCare is having on the lives of real people. That's why since I've gotten here, from the time I campaigned to be a U.S. Senator, and up until even a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about repealing this law and getting rid of it because we can see what's coming down the pike. We can see what the impact of this law is going to be going forward. This is not about whether you're in favor or against ObamaCare anymore. This is about whether we are going to allow a change in federal law to hurt millions and millions of Americans and to have such a disruptive impact on our economy. And that's what this is doing. It's have a disruptive impact on our economy. You saw from just the 2 emails that I read that there are people that have now lost hours at work or their jobs directly because of ObamaCare. We've been talking about that now for a few months. But then you have people out there that are buying insurance on the individual market. Let's say they're self-employed or their employer doesn't offer health insurance, so they go out and buy a health insurance plan for themselves. They found a plan that they could afford and that covered what they wanted to have covered. They were happy with the plan. It wasn't perfect, it didn't have everything, but it was what they could afford and it was okay and good for them. And they were told that they would be able to keep that. But the Obama administration knew all along that that wasn't true. This is not an unintended consequence. This was an intended consequence. And yet, they were going around telling people that they would not lose their coverage, despite knowing that between 50 and 70% of people who get insurance from the individual marketplace would lose their coverage. And now, of course, we're seeing that happen. Their answer now is, well, you're going to have a better insurance plan available to you. It may cover more things, but it may cover things, for example, you don't need and don't want to have to pay for. And invariably, most of these plans that are now available instead of the plan you used to have, they have higher deductibles and they cost more money, meaning many of these people really won't have insurance. In fact, they're going to end up just having to pay a fine next year and they're worse off than they used to be. Shouldn't every American have the right to buy whatever insurance they want? Shouldn't every American be able to choose what kind of insurance coverage they want and make sure that they can afford it? Obamacare makes that impossible. And that's why this law cannot be saved. That's why this law must be repealed. But in the interim, while my Democratic colleagues come to that realization, and that's going to take some time, unfortunately, I have co-sponsored a bill by Senator Johnson of Wisconsin that basically says that if you have existing coverage and you want to keep it, you can. That doesn't mean that you can't go out and shop for another plan. That doesn't mean you can't go on the exchange and get insurance from there if the website works. But that does mean that if you have coverage that you're happy with, you get to keep that. That's an option available to you. And for the life of me, I don't understand how anyone could be against that. After all, the president himself made that promise, as you saw at the beginning of this broadcast. So this week I end on a somber note because I'm just so troubled by the anxiety in the letters and the emails and in the phone calls that we're getting from everyday Floridians that are just scared to death about what this is going to mean to them. They are starting to see the impact this is having, and it is highly disruptive. It's unfair. We need to deal with this as soon as possible, and I hope that we can and will. I'll continue to do that, and I thank you for your support, and I promise we'll keep working on this to try to make it better and eventually to get rid of this law and replace it with common sense ideas that increase the availability of affordable health insurance for every American. Until then, thank you so much for the privilege of serving you here in Washington, D.C. May God continue to bless the great state of Florida and each of you, and may God always bless the United States of America.